Hello, we are the Edufuturists. I'm Dan Fitzpatrick.
I'm Ben Whittaker.
And I'm Stephen Hope.
The podcast by educators, for educators, the Edufuturists podcast.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Edufuturists podcast. Thank you everyone for listening. It really does mean a lot to us as serving educators. On this show we have Chris Melia, apologies. Who's a Senior Learning Technologist at the University of Central Lancashire, known as UCLan, and Digital Learning Lead for the University's Faculty of Health and Wellbeing. Since 2018, Chris has led development of UCLan's innovative and sector-endorsed DigiLearn initiative to recognise and reward academic colleagues for their innovative digital practice.
Yeah, keen to widen collaboration across the sector, he established UCLan's DigiLearn sector, a community fostered to connect digital practitioners from FE, HE, schools and beyond. Chris is a lead contributor to UCLan's technology-enabled learning and teaching blog, and also has his own blog, #EdTechThoughts. As a Microsoft Learning consultant, Chris now works with other institutions, supporting their adoption of Microsoft technologies to improve both staff and student outcomes. And he tweets at ChrisLearnTech.
The podcast by educators, for educators, the Edufuturists podcast.
Chris, it's great to have you on the podcast. How are you doing?
Very well, thanks. I just hope I can live up to that introduction.
Well, didn't you email it to us?
Come on, Dan. Come on, you can't do that.
Oh, I'm joking, man. I'm joking. Should we jump in at the deep end? We mentioned Microsoft there. Both myself and Ben have a background in using Google. What's better, Microsoft or Google?
Oh, mate, you've gone there early. You've gone there.
Wow.
Shot
Are we a minute in? I think to counter that, I think it'd be a good opportunity to kind of, the DigiLearn sector initiative and that body of work that we're looking at the moment. It was interesting because our last event that we had, the last kind of physical event, the DigiLearn Sector Connect event, we actually had Steve down there. He opened the event with like a keynote session. It's interesting because the community that we've got staged, it really isn't platform specific. So I think, there are similarities between different aspects and different applications within the suites, but really, as we all know, it's pedagogy first, pedagogically focused. What's the right tool for the job? What's the scenario and what's the benefit for the staff and the students ultimately?
Definitely, and you've given a very serious answer to a jokey question. I'm sorry for putting you on the spot like that, Chris.
Couldn't possibly have been prepared for that.
and I know that obviously at the your last event where Steve was speaking, it was about culture, wasn't it? And it wasn't
Absolutely.
about specifics. And I think we will get into some specifics today. And I think that's really good. I think it's really healthy to have that discourse and that discussion because I'm obviously at Burnley College. And the stuff that we're doing there, some of it is Google. There's a lot of people that use Teams, and there's a lot of people that are still using the Microsoft tools, and that's absolutely cool. That's what it should be like, isn't it? It should be the right tool for the right job, and I think that's where we're going. So, talk to us a little bit, if you could, about your learning technologist role. Me and Dan are quite envious about this because we think that senior learning technologist title sounds like the golden halo of a job.
Really? Well, the job title is quite a controversial one, I'd say, but I'll kind of get into that a little bit. So my background, interestingly enough, is actually audio. So my degree was in sound engineering. And I kind of left university and, to be honest, struggled a little bit to find work, as a lot of people do in those kinds of industries. I actually struggled to find kind of voluntary work, any kind of experience really, and ended up kind of moving through several roles, part-time and eventually full-time, that were like retail-based roles, just anything I could get my hands on really. And then I was working in retail for about a year or so, and I was just thinking to myself, there must be something more than this. I want to contribute to a bigger picture. I want to have an impact in my career, and that's what kind of drew me towards education. And for me, being local to the University of Central Lancashire, I was looking at actively seeking out roles at that institution and others locally. And I applied for what was a technical support role initially, and then over the next couple of years progressed through a number of different roles, which were multimedia focused. So that kind of pulled in some of my experience and expertise with audio and video, moving into a role that supported our virtual learning environment, which is Blackboard at the university. And then I moved into a learning technologist role, which was supporting a faculty directly. So it was quite a unique role because we have a central team. But the role that I applied for was specifically focused on one faculty. And that was really interesting because that really was about culture. It was about building relationships, going into that faculty and, seeking out digital champions and supporting them in their approaches to embedding technology effectively. And the learning technologist job is quite an interesting one because, you know, the role can be perceived quite often as being a technical role or a purely technical role, but it's actually quite pedagogically focused as well. And I feel that it's really heading more into academic development, particularly in my own role. And it's interesting because I actually wrote a part of a blog series recently for the Association for Learning Technology, which was about what makes a learning technologist. And there are so many variations on the job title, whether it's an educational developer, a technology enhanced learning advisor. There are so many variations of it. But yeah, it's quite an interesting one, really.
Yeah, I think it is, and me and Dan have both said that we would love that role as being able to support teachers and whole divisions and faculties and whatever else to embrace and adopt technology and find digital solutions to what they're doing. And I know that one of these solutions that you used, and I know Dan was controversial earlier. Dan, I can't believe you did that. I can't believe that we invited Chris onto this. He's given us his time in an evening, and you went there. So,
well, Chris doesn't want to mess about, do you? Let's get to the juicy issues.
I think it'd be really cool for you to. We've seen a huge push on advertising around Microsoft Teams as a platform for effective communication. I'd love you to talk to us about that because I know that some of my staff are using that a lot. I've had a little play with it, and actually, I'm going to say this out loud, everyone. This is going to be on a podcast.
Go on,
I really liked it.
Right, okay.
So I've don't get me wrong. I still, if you cut me, I still bleed green, yellow, blue. but I think they're almost Microsoft colours.
Yeah, they are Microsoft colours. Yeah.
So will you talk to us a little bit about Teams?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because one of all our colleagues, you know, Esam from City of Westminster College.
Yeah.
He kind of describes it. The word that he used in one of the quotes I quite like is that it's a disruptor in the education sector. And I think that's quite interesting because we honestly do believe that in our time in higher education and colleagues that I work with, there's nothing that's really come along like this in terms of building that hub and bringing together communication, collaboration, and content creation or co-creation all under one roof. And I think that's what's so interesting about it. I think from a student perspective, the way that it actually harnesses the characteristics of social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, etc., and really caters to their needs and the ways they're actually accessing content. I think, you know, if you look at some of the GISC stats from the Digital Experience Insights survey, around, you know, 8 out of every 10 students are actually using mobile devices to support their learning. And I think it just works so well in that way, in that kind of instant experience. The students really do love it, you know, from the experiences we've had with it. But I think also on the staff side, what it's allowing us to do is create communities and create these spaces which connect staff from different departments. It kind of works outside of the kind of end-to-end conversations that you might have through emails. It's much more organic, much more natural, and I think that's some of the real value of it, really. Yeah,
definitely. And I've done some of the training for the Microsoft tools, and I really like it. We don't use it, but
Dan. Have you started this, and now you're backtracking and saying you've done some Microsoft training?
Yeah. I didn't back one side or another. No, I think what Chris is saying is absolutely right in terms of what works for you, and the fact that it's not I think by focusing on that question as well, which is what I did, but focusing on that question, you do miss the fact that this is radically changing how, especially within, like, I work at a school, and how we communicate with each other, how we communicate with students, how students collaborate on work, and a lot of those skills that it does foster are skills that students are really going to need in the future workplace in order to especially those collaboration skills. We were talking on the podcast a few weeks ago about how many workplaces now are collaboration orientated in terms of how they work. It's not just one person who's getting on with a task now, but it's many people from many different disciplines working on projects together. And for students to be able to do that in such a way as using new technology is going to give them massive and much needed skills.
Yeah, I think it's just, honestly, it's just providing so many new learning opportunities. Just the ways that students can engage with it. In an evening, they can pull out the phone, and within a couple of seconds, they're engaging. They might be sharing a resource, it might be a news article, and within a couple of taps, they can share it to a learning community. And that kind of thing just hasn't been possible before. You know, you think back to different virtual learning environments, and quite often the tools that are available in there are the very kind of old-fashioned forum, discussion board type tools. And, you know, staff that I were working with, we really noticed a lack in engagement with those kinds of tools. And there was just a demand for something else. And I think it came right at the time we needed it, really. And I think another thing that we've noticed is just how responsive Microsoft are in terms of the features, in terms of what the students want, what the staff want. Quite often students are feeding things back to staff. They're coming to me, and I have a direct link into the product team for Microsoft Teams. And we've seen things become implemented within 6 months. It's just crazy. It's kind of unheard of, really, in terms of vendors and people that we've been working with in EdTech. So it's really, really positive to see that responsiveness.
Yeah, I think that's the whole part of the building of the community in the sector, isn't it? I think that collaboration between colleges and universities has not necessarily been something we've done particularly well, I don't think. I think sharing of resources, and I think that our institutions are very, very close. And in fact, in Burnley, there's the UCLan site. One of the UCLan sites is right up the road from Burnley College. So this is really important, and I'm looking forward to coming to speaking on the 17th of March at your DigiLearn Sector Connect.
Absolutely,
because it's really important that we do this, isn't it? That we don't see ourselves in silos or see ourselves as in competition. It's actually, we all want the best for every learner, so therefore we should go and as use Steve's phrase, magpie ideas from everywhere and bring them back and show them in our context and use them in our context. I presume that's why the community was set up. Is that right?
Absolutely. I mean, the DigiLearn sector, I mean, it actually came from the name DigiLearn came from the internal recognition and reward program that we have for academic staff. So that's about recognising and rewarding academic staff for inclusive and innovative practice, and really building a community of practitioners, and we call them practitioners, advocates and champions. Those are the kind of 3 levels of our programme. And it is about empowering that academic community, sharing good practice, encouraging staff to support each other and mentor each other through this programme. And that was a really, really positive development. And I was thinking, well, surely we can take this model, take this practice-informed approach and take it to a sector level. And that's what we did with the DigiLearn sector. And I think for us, it was around about April last year when we were hosting our 2nd annual Microsoft event, which we do with the Surface team. And we were thinking, well, how can we really continue those conversations outside of the physical meetups? Because quite often, I'm sure you've both been to different events, and you do make connections, but you don't always follow them up, and there's not always the right forum to kind of continue those conversations or ask questions, share resources. So we thought, right, we can see how much of an impact that Teams is having internally. We're very aware that other organisations across the sector are starting to adopt it as well. Why don't we set up a team? Because actually we can invite external guests in and we can start building this community. So that's what we did. We launched it at the end of that event last April. There was reasonable engagement on the day, and we started picking up a few members. But I mean, over the last 6 months, it's just rocketed the community. We've got about 560 members now from over 200 organisations, some of which are global. We've got organisations in the US, Australia, all over Europe. And the best thing about it is it is universities, it's colleges, it's schools, it's organisations, it's colleagues who are freelance, who might be e-learning developers. it's a place where anybody can come to for help, advice, support, and to share resources. And it's really, really positive to see how organically that is growing.
That sounds cool. And for our listeners, how can they join it? Is it an easy process?
Absolutely. So the URL to actually look at the kind of information pack and sign up with the little form that we've created is UCLan, so it's UCLan.ac.uk, and then it's / DigiLearn sector.
Brilliant.
That's the URL. So there's all the information on there. We run webinars. We did run one earlier today. They tend to be every couple of weeks, or 3 weeks, or 4 weeks. And again, they're a real mix. Some of the webinars have been led by product experts in industry. So we've had the Wolcott team have been on there, the Flipgrid team. We've had colleagues from the Microsoft teams for Teams and other product groups. We've had Steve on there. We've had colleagues just sharing their teaching practice. We had a lady from a local school today talking about her experience using Microsoft Teams with students for teaching and learning. So it's just a really varied community, and we want to showcase as much innovative practice as possible. And I think, as you said, there is absolutely a lot of synergy between what we're doing with DigiLearn and the fantastic work that you guys are doing around recognising and celebrating excellence in the sector.
Yeah, and I think that's it's amazing, and this is all coming out of the north, the northern powerhouse. I laugh and joke about it, and I laugh and joke because all these summits and events seem to all be south of Birmingham or in Birmingham or below, and
not
I
anymore.
think no, it's moving, it's changing, and I think that it's powerful. It's powerful that people are coming together and saying we want to celebrate the best of the best. We want to celebrate the people that are trying stuff and having a go. So it was amazing to have. I know you mentioned before we went on air that we had Deb's Kelsey Miller from over in Grimsby. Is Grimsby, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, I do you know you have them panics when you're saying something and thinking, have I said the right thing? Yeah, we did an interview the other day. I was involved in it. So they're celebrating amazing stuff that's going on over there, and we had Khalid on a few weeks ago, and loads of great stuff that's happening all around the north. And so, when you're doing this, why is it important to you to you talked about celebration? Why do you think it's important to celebrate educators and celebrate this and recognise? You talked about like the online badging and certification and stuff. Why do you think that's important?
Yeah, I think quite often people kind of staff can get stuck in a rut thinking what they're doing is just run of the mill, and it's quite often not. And they might not think of it as particularly innovative or excellent, but it is. And I think that the whole idea behind the DigiLearn initiative is that it wasn't starting out with, all right, let's introduce a piece of technology and get people using it. It was about what are people already doing, because approaches translate across technologies, as we said earlier on, whether it's Google, Microsoft, whatever solution it is. So we want to find out what people are doing, share it, and I think just opening up those conversations, you can quite often, with course teams, those conversations can stay within an office and they never get shared. And actually this community and this DigiLearn initiative has opened up those conversations, broken down barriers, and just encourage people to get out and present. I mean, a lot of our academic staff have been now out there presenting at sector events, EdTech events. I mean, I did BET last year with a couple of academic colleagues presenting their team's journey, and the reception to that was just brilliant. And we've done different JISC events and things. So I found personally that the combination of myself, a learning technologist, and an academic colleague is really, really powerful, because it gives a full picture really around the wider adoption of a technology and where that came from, but the authentic experience of the academic and how that links into the student experience. Yeah,
it's nice.
Yeah, in terms of the technology and transforming learning, is this? Do you think? Because I know we've talked about this a few times on the podcast, but education in the UK seems to be kind of splitting into two camps at the moment. If you kind of read into it, there's quite a traditional wing that thinks that education should stay traditional in terms of kind of how it was done and more of that, and there are some schools in the country who are kind of leading the way in terms of that and not embracing technology at all, really, and just going back to kind of rote learning and all that kind of thing, and that's got a big following. And then you've got other schools who are like next week we've got Martin said from XP schools coming on, and they're kind of leading the way in terms of project-based learning and how technology integrates with that. It's just a really interesting. I think education in the UK in the next 10, 20 years it's going to be really interesting to watch to see how that goes. And what's your view on that? Do you think that divide's going to keep going? Do you think eventually all schools are going to have to realistically come to terms with the fact that technology is part of our students' lives, it's part of our lives, and it's going to be part of their lives in the future workforce? So they're going to have to get to grips with it.
Absolutely. I mean, we talk about the modern workplace. It's effectively the digital workplace. And, more and more kind of reports are coming out, the fourth industrial revolution and the kind of JISC reports around skills that are needed and graduate attributes there. I think we need to be addressing that. I've spoke with colleagues at schools and colleges about how can we align this? How can we align the student experience from school to college to university to really build that kind of preparation for the future work environment up through stages, and it not just be a kind of sudden jump from school to college or college to university. So I think there's something to be said about aligning the different sectors within education, which I would like to think is something that we can really do in the DigiLearn sector by bringing everybody into that environment, because quite often there are communities that are, this is just FE or this is just HE or this is just schools really, but we're not doing that. We're kind of opening those doors. So I think a lot of the platforms that we're adopting, the Microsoft, the Office 365 suite, in particular Teams, it is really developing those skills in students in communication and collaboration. I think, particularly Teams, what we're noticing is it's helping students develop their professional online presence and voice, and they can make mistakes because it's in a safe environment, but it allows them to develop those skills. And as I say, that online behaviour and professionalism before they're out in the big wide world and they're using Twitter and other platforms.
It's that whole stuff where you were talking around Twitter as well. We are quite what's the word I'm looking for? Like, well into it. That's not the word I was looking for, but like proponents of it and use that quite heavily. And I know that one of our winners of one of the Edufuturists awards from last year, James Wolcott, won his award about digital wellbeing and about was all around his use of Twitter for follow back Wednesday and how he was trying to get people to share and to follow and to be around people and to comment and get to know people and networking and Steve's not on the podcast tonight because he's actually down at the EdTech 50.
Yeah, spotted on Twitter.
And well, ironically, we were just talking about Twitter, and we've all seen it on Twitter that there's a picture there, and that whole the premise around networking and around supporting and celebrating is it's just really nice to see that eventually we kind of got there, haven't we? In the sector where we're trying to recognise that, and we've all seen Twitter being used in a way that's not helpful for educators, but that staff room, that some people say that it's the best staff room in the world. It's a place where you can learn and you can find support, and it's nice to see that that's happening in person as well. Some of the stuff I know you've got some events coming up. We mentioned the next one on the 17th of March, and you've got some other stuff that's coming up. I don't know if you want to tell our listeners about that stuff as well.
Yeah, I mean, the Connect event. So we had the one at the end of November, which Steve was presented at last year. And then we've got the one upcoming 17th of March, DigiLearn Sector Connect. And what we did with these events, because we were quite conscious that the sector community was really kicking off. We've got the active online environment with conversations and discussions on different topics. We had the webinars, which were a real draw as well for people joining the community. But we didn't want to lose sight of those physical connections and meetups. I always look forward to those events, and it's where I really do connect with and meet new educators. So we really wanted to continue with a form of physical event, and that's where the DigiLearn Sector Connects came about, really. It was never going to be a large conference with multiple breakout rooms. That's what we do with the Microsoft event. This was almost like a focused group of experts, really, bringing colleagues together to address, discuss, and share around a particular theme. So the last event that we did in November was around developing the digital capability of staff. So we shared different presentations. Steve did a session. There were a number of Ignite sessions throughout the day, snapshots of what institutions are doing to equip their staff and celebrate and share practice, etc. And there was a lot of active workshop discussion as well, asking people, well, what do we think are the considerations for these kinds of programs, and how are they going to impact, and how do we measure the impacts of them on practice, academic practice, and the student experience. So that was a really positive event. And then the next one that we're doing in March, 17th of March, is around how we digitally equip students for the modern workplace. So I'd like to think we did that quite authentically, because I'm sure you guys agree, but it has to start with the staff. We have to start in really equipping them and developing their capability to help them innovate in the practice and ultimately embed digital within the curriculum. It has to be done that way. And a lot of institutions, their resource is quite limited in terms of learning technology and support. So that's where empowering academic champions really came into that. But yeah, I think these physical events, they are really, really important. And maintaining that human physical interaction, if you will, is important to us.
I like it.
It'd be great to get into the whole kind of the HE university side of things, because I know I'm secondary based, Ben and Steve are FE based, but that whole I guess HE probably comes with its own set of challenges and is a different beast really to colleges and schools. Could you maybe explore a bit about how it is different and the kind of cool stuff that's going on there, really?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the one of the biggest things for us is the scale, and then the kind of the diversity of similar with FE, but the diversity of students and staff, the diversity of subject area and discipline as well. And we have strong backing in a number of areas, healthcare and engineering. One of our big kind of focuses is a discipline. We've just had our new Engineering Innovation Centre built, which is the building where we'll be hosting a couple of our upcoming events. So I think scale's a big thing, and I think resources. I mean, even for us, we're a team of 12 that support all of the e-learning, VLE support, training for Office 365 and different applications. So I think, ultimately we share a lot of the same challenges. It's something I mentioned in the video that we did at the event. That's the whole idea behind the sector is, we're different organisations, but we've all got the same goal, which is ultimately equipping students and developing their capability to, on that next step in their journey, whether that is moving into FE, whether it's moving into an apprenticeship, whether it's moving on to HE, or indeed their future career. So I think, the more we can align that, the better, really. Although there are differences between the sectors, we also share a lot of the same challenges.
Yeah, go on. You jumping in there, Dan? Sorry?
No, I was just going to say, in terms of, I guess, with that scale, in terms of like a whole organisation strategy, because I guess in a school, and then a college, it gets more and more difficult to implement like a whole organisational strategy. Yeah. But I imagine kind of putting that strategy together and expecting all of your lecturers to follow it on a university level must be very, very difficult. And do they just stick to what they've always known?
I think it's always going to be mixed. People take change on in different ways, and I think what the approach that we're taking as a team within the university is the DigiLearn approach, which is practice informed. We don't want to say, oh, we really think you should be doing this, or we really think you should be using this. We want to get people on side. We want to start conversation, and actually, it's about understanding practice, understanding how people work. Just starting a conversation, because actually what happens quite often is that you'll identify some challenges that they face, and then you can look at, well, actually, how can we better address these? And that's where the technology comes in. So I think it's just the order that you approach that in. And what we try and do with the DigiLearn approach is get staff, together in workshops, just discussing what they're doing, what works, what doesn't work, how we can support them better. And that organically kind of takes them on their journey, really, to share what they're doing, learn, and just connect with other colleagues and think outside of their bubble, if you will, which is something that I'm big on personally, is kind of stepping outside of that organisational bubble sometimes and connecting with colleagues from different sectors, nationally, internationally, and getting a bigger perspective on what's out there and how we can really enhance the student experience.
Yeah, and I agree. And one of the things I've been reading, because obviously we have a HE provision where we are nowhere near on the scale of what you guys are doing at UCLan, but in the same nature of developing what a university of the future looks like, just in the same way that we're all talking about colleges and schools of the future. We often talk about that on the podcast. I read a great article from the World Economic Forum, and on that it talks about the 6 ways to future-proof universities. One of the things that it talks about that I'm like geeking out about at the moment is around this idea of data science and about how we need to have more data science. And I'm not suggesting we talk about data science on that level, but I just thought it was intriguing. It was intriguing that they reckon that by the end of this year, let me just quote it perfectly. It says, by the end of this year, it's estimated that for every one person on Earth, 1.7 megabytes of data will be created every second. And you think that is a phenomenal amount. Wow. Some of the stats that are out there that at the end of 2018, so this is where the data's come from here, that Google was conducting 3.8 million searches every minute. There were 6,940 Tinder matches every minute. And some of the stuff that is happening in terms of, you might say, what's this rabbit hole he's going down? He's talking about data science, but what it's saying is that we need to understand that the world of the future is changing dramatically, and data is being used in lots and loads of different ways. But then in the same way, they talk about one of the other points that they're trying to talk about is that they should embed ethics in universities. Not that they're not there already, but this idea that all this new technology and the fourth industrial revolution and all the stuff around that and STEM and the exciting stuff that comes with that, we've got this human element that we still need to remember, that it's not just about doing things because they look shiny and cool. It's about doing the right things. I did some leadership training recently, and we were talking about Peter Drucker's definition, and he talks about management is about doing the right things, and management is about doing things right. But leadership is about doing the right things. I think that's really important about growing with integrity as well, isn't it? Because UCLan's had some huge growth, but it's massively growing with integrity in the sector that it's in, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, one of the most exciting things is just how across the sector, particularly in HE, we are kind of identified now as a hub and a catalyst for digital transformation. And that leads nicely into our event in June, which we've kind of titled Digital Transformation in Education with Office 365 and the Surface. But it's really a celebration of digital practice and innovation, both within the institution itself and with other organisations as well. So we're actually, just as a quick plug, we're actually we're looking for proposals for that event, of which I'll find a way of sharing the link with you guys that you might be able to put out in some way. We're looking for proposals for Ignite presentations, for more practical workshops and different types of session from all different sectors. So primary, secondary, further, higher, different organisations. We want a wide, varied agenda that's going to look at the breadth of practice really across the sector. That's a really exciting development.
Yeah, it sounds great. And I know I went down a rabbit hole, but I think it's really important that we always focus on this idea that we've never really arrived, and the status quo. And if we don't challenge the status quo and don't start thinking about it, but also do that with integrity and with ethics, then it's lost, isn't it? So we'll love to promote the stuff that's going on, and share that with our listeners around how they might might be able to book onto some of the DigiLearn Sector Connect events and some of the bigger stuff around digital transformation. And we'd love you guys to be involved in what we do at the Edufuturists Summit and Awards as well. So thanks so much, Chris, for coming on. We appreciate your time. We know that you told us before you came online that you even made sure that the children were in the house, so it was perfect for sound. Maybe us as
that's the audio background coming in, that isn't it?
Yeah, that's what it is. I tell you what, we maybe we as podcast hosts should take a leaf out of your book and throw our children away. Or I didn't really. I take offence to the grandparents. I mean,
this is taking a really dark turn. What we're doing?
I don't know where I'm going with that. But no, thanks for coming on, Chris. We appreciate it. And keep up the great work that you're doing with UCLan.
Big fan of your work as well, guys. So thank you. I think what we're doing is really a join. There's a lot of symmetry between it. So let's continue celebrating excellence and innovation.
Amazing.
Cheers, Chris. It was great to chat.
No worries. Thanks.